The space station hummed with quiet energy, a massive hub suspended in the dark, starry void. Ships of all shapes and sizes docked like insects swarming a luminous hive, their lights reflecting across the station's polished metal floors. Among the countless aliens bustling here, humans were rare. Most species saw them as fragile, short-lived, and unremarkable. But today, one human would challenge that assumption. In the center of the station, within the glass and steel towers of the Drake Consortium, the most powerful dragon-like corporation in the galaxy, a meeting was about to change everything. The dragon boss, Sarilith, perched in her high chair, her scales glinting like molten bronze. Her eyes were sharp and cold, the color of polished amber. The entire room fell silent when she spoke. "I need a partner," she said, her voice a low, rumbling growl. "Someone to protect my position legally. Someone who can stand beside me even if they cannot match my power." Her advisors, all dragons of high rank, blinked in confusion. Such words were almost unheard of in their world. Dragons did not need humans and they did not need help. They only needed control. Yet here she was, speaking like she needed a crutch. The room was filled with tension. Outside, the galaxy spun in chaos, trade routes warred over and rival clans plotted her downfall. Sarilith's advisors had proposed countless solutions: assassination, alliances with other dragons, or hiring mercenaries. But she had rejected them all. This was different. She scanned the list of potential candidates. Every dragon she considered either demanded too much loyalty, had too many enemies, or was too predictable. Then her gaze fell upon someone unusual, a human. He was nothing remarkable at first glance. Garen, a retired war veteran now working security for a neutral trading post, had thick brown hair, sharp green eyes, and a calm, disciplined presence. He did not look like a hero. He did not look like a dragon killer. He looked human. "Bring him in," Sarilith ordered. Her claws tapped against the armrest, echoing in the room. The doors slid open and Garen walked in, unarmed, his posture relaxed but alert. He had been briefed only vaguely. Someone powerful wanted him. He had no idea who. The room went still. Dragons towered over him, scales glimmering, wings folded elegantly against their backs. Many whispered to each other, barely hiding their amusement. A human in their boardroom. This would be entertaining. Sarilith's gaze pinned him to the spot. "You are to pretend to be my husband," she said bluntly. There was no smile, no charm, just a statement of fact. "Immediately. There will be legal contracts, social appearances, and public obligations. You will follow my orders without question." The human blinked once, then calmly replied, "I see, and if I refuse?" A ripple of laughter ran through the dragons, though Sarilith's face remained unchanged. "You will obey," she said, "or you will be discarded." Garen leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "I don't obey orders blindly," he said, his voice steady. "I can follow them, but on terms." The room fell silent. No human had ever spoken like this. To question a dragon, let alone one of Sarilith's rank, was unimaginable. Some of the advisors shifted uneasily. "Terms?" Sarilith asked, raising one eyebrow. "Yes," Garen said. "I will pretend to be your husband if three conditions are met. 1. I will have full access to the information I need to protect us both. 2. I will not be treated as your possession. 3. I will walk away freely if I choose." The dragon's jaws dropped. None dared to challenge the dragon boss openly. And yet this human dared to negotiate. Sarilith's amber eyes narrowed, but instead of anger there was a spark of curiosity. Most humans would have begged, cowered, or fled. This one didn't. This one might even be useful or dangerous, perhaps both. "Interesting," she said softly. "You are brave or foolish, perhaps both. Very well, your terms are acceptable." She paused, letting the words hang. "But know this, human, if you fail, there will be no second chance." "I understand," Garen said. He did not smile. He did not flinch. The dragons in the room began to murmur again, though quieter this time. They had never seen a human so calm in the face of death, or at least, what they considered death. Sarilith gestured, and the human was led to a private chamber within the tower. There she explained what was expected: appearances at social events, legal contracts of partnership, and most importantly, the vigilance required to survive in dragon politics. Garen listened quietly, absorbing everything. His mind, trained by decades of human warfare, began to calculate risks, advantages, and hidden threats. He noticed small details others missed: the way the advisor's claws twitched, the subtle tension in Sarilith's shoulders, the way certain doors had been left unlocked. "This is not a game," Sarilith said, pacing. "Every alliance you make, every word you speak will be measured. One wrong step and you will die, or worse, I will die and your role ends there." "I understand," Garen repeated. But inside he felt no fear, only the familiar rush of a challenge. He had survived human wars where planets burned, where entire armies were destroyed, and where betrayal came from friends as well as enemies. A dragon empire, complex, yes, but hardly new. Over the next few hours he observed the room. Dragon politics were cruel but predictable. Every nod, every pause, every glance carried weight. The humans he had fought beside in his past would have crumbled under this pressure, but he would not. By the time the sun rose over the artificial horizon of the space station, Sarilith had already begun to see him differently. He was not weak. He was not emotional. He was intelligent, disciplined, and unafraid. Traits dragons often assumed humans did not possess. When she returned to her chambers that evening, she found herself thinking, perhaps for the first time, that a human might actually survive beside her. Not as a pawn, not as a servant, but as a partner. Dangerous, yes, but useful in ways she had not imagined. Yet the galaxy would not wait for her to make friends. Rivals were plotting. Assassins were already moving. And the human, by simply existing in her world, had already begun to change it. That night, Garen looked out over the station, watching ships take off into the darkness. For most species, humans were weak, disposable, and irrelevant. For the dragon boss, he was a tool and perhaps a threat. And for Garen himself, he realized something. Survival was never about strength alone. It was about understanding the game, anticipating the moves, and staying calm when others panicked. In a galaxy where dragons ruled with fire, strength, and fear, the human had already made his first move. And it was bold. The following days on the station were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarilith's rivals in the Dragon Council had already sensed something unusual. They noticed the dragon boss walking beside a human, not as a servant, not as a messenger, but as her partner. Whispered rumors spread quickly, like sparks in dry grass. Garen, for his part, remained calm. He had spent decades in human wars where chaos was normal, where survival demanded sharp instincts and quick decisions. Nothing in dragon society, no scale, no claw, no fire, surprised him. Sarilith summoned him to her strategy room, a massive chamber filled with holographic star maps, legal documents, and data streams of the galaxy's trade networks. The air hummed with tension and authority. "You must understand," Sarilith said, pacing. "Your presence beside me changes everything. My rivals will not wait, they will test you. They will try to see if humans break under pressure." Garen nodded. "I understand. I will act cautiously, but I will not cower." "It will not help either of us." The dragon boss paused. Few humans ever spoke with such confidence. Most trembled at the sight of a dragon's claws or the heat of their breath. Most begged for mercy. Garen did neither. "Good," she said. "Then you must learn dragon politics quickly. Observe, predict, and survive. That is how you will help me." For the next several days, Garen followed Sarilith into the intricate web of dragon society. They attended council meetings where dozens of dragon nobles sat in rows, scales gleaming, wings tucked tightly behind them. Every word, every pause, every flick of the tail carried meaning. At the first meeting, A senior counselor, Velkor, sneered at the human. "You expect us to take advice from a species that survives only by luck and numbers," he hissed. "This man is nothing. He cannot possibly understand power." Garen's calm green eyes met Velkor's amber glare. "Luck has little to do with survival," he said quietly. "Strategy, observation, and timing matter far more." The room went silent. The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. A human was correcting a dragon, a veteran no less. Velkor flared, his claws tapping against the council table. "Boldness will get you crushed," he said, venom in his voice. "Perhaps," Garen replied evenly, "but history shows humans adapt faster than you might expect." The council murmured. Many dragons had dismissed humans as weak and fragile, and yet this one stood unafraid. Sarilith watched closely, a subtle smile forming. For the first time, she felt the faint thrill of respect. Over the next days, Garen began to observe the council's hidden tensions. He noticed small signals, which advisors whispered to each other, which fingers twitched near concealed weapons, which dragons avoided looking at certain names in the reports. These were subtle cues others ignored, assuming humans could not notice or understand them. He took careful notes in his mind. Every whisper, every sidelong glance, every subtle gesture became part of a larger puzzle. By the time the next council meeting arrived, Garen had already predicted the moves of two rival clans. When the session began, one of the clans attempted a political maneuver to weaken Sarilith's control over the trade routes. They presented falsified reports, claiming she had lost influence in key sectors. Before anyone could react, Garen spoke. "If these reports were accurate, we would already see consequences in shipping logs, patrol reports, and trade balances. None of this has occurred. The data shows your claims are exaggerated." The council paused. Dragons prided themselves on power and knowledge. And here was a human dissecting their claims with calm precision. Velkor's jaw tightened. "How do you know this?" Garen's gaze never wavered. "I read patterns, I observe weaknesses." Humans do not rely on brute force alone. We survive by understanding the battlefield, no matter what form it takes. Some dragons whispered. Others sat back, unsure whether to laugh or fear. Sarilith's tail flicked in approval. She had seen many advisors over her lifetime, but none had the clarity of mind and calm reasoning that this human displayed. After the council adjourned, Sarilith walked with Garen in the quiet corridors. "You surprise me," she said. Most humans would have panicked or insulted Velkor openly. Garen shrugged lightly. "Panic solves nothing, and I do not insult unless it serves a purpose. Observing and reacting are far more effective than emotion." Sarilith considered this. "You see weaknesses where dragons see strength. You notice patterns others ignore. You think differently, like a predator who does not roar." Garen's lips twitched in a small smile. "Not a predator, a survivor." That evening, as the station lights dimmed, Garen reviewed the intelligence he had gathered. He mapped rival clans' movements, noting patterns of bribery, loyalty, and betrayal. He prepared contingency plans, anticipating attacks not just physically, but politically and socially. Sarilith entered quietly, watching him work. "You are thorough," she said. "No dragon I have met would take so much time to study the enemy before striking." "I learned early," Garen replied, "that hasty action without understanding leads to unnecessary death. Humans know this well. Many of our wars were lost or won because someone underestimated the enemy." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. She realized humans, despite their lack of strength and fire, possessed a subtle kind of power: intelligence, endurance, and adaptability. And that power could be terrifying if used correctly. Over the next week, rival clans attempted subtle attacks on Sarilith's empire. False accusations, sabotaged shipments, and threats to her allies were all part of their strategy. But each time, Garen anticipated their moves, countering quietly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. One night, a trap was laid in Sarilith's private chamber. An advisor, pretending loyalty, had planted a concealed device meant to weaken her influence and reputation. The dragons around her were oblivious. They assumed such a thing could never happen under their watch. Garen noticed the unusual glint of metal beneath a chair. Without panicking, he dismantled the device, noting its source. When Sarilith returned to her chamber, she found the human waiting calmly. "You prevented it," she said softly. "I noticed the signs," he replied. "Weakness often hides in places no one thinks to check." Her respect grew. Not admiration, not affection, respect. A rare and precious thing for a dragon, often reserved only for equals who could survive their world's brutal tests. By now, whispers spread through the empire. The human beside the dragon boss was not ordinary. Even rivals began to reconsider their strategies, cautious of someone they had assumed was weak. Velcor, frustrated, confronted Sarilith. "You risk everything by keeping him close. A human cannot understand our politics, our strength. He will fail." Sarilith's amber eyes flared. "He has already outmaneuvered two of your schemes without a single misstep. He is not weak, and if you continue to underestimate him, it will cost you more than you expect." Garen remained silent as the exchange occurred. He didn't need to argue. Actions spoke louder than words, and his actions had already changed the perception of humans in this dragon-led empire. The days passed, each filled with subtle battles, quiet calculations, and strategic displays of intelligence. By now, Sarilith found herself increasingly relying on his observations and insights. She had expected a tool, a human to be molded, commanded, and discarded. Instead, she found a partner who thought, acted, and survived in ways no dragon had anticipated. Yet the galaxy outside was not idle. Rival clans were not done testing the dragon boss. They would soon escalate, and Garen would have to prove once again why humans survived where stronger, faster, or more powerful species often failed. For now, though, the station held a fragile calm. Sarilith and Garen walked through the observation deck, looking out over the blinking lights of ships departing into space. "You are unlike any human I have met," she said quietly. Garen turned to her, his expression steady. "And you are unlike any dragon I have served under. But survival doesn't care about differences. It only rewards those who are ready." The dragon boss studied him for a long moment. She realized something profound. The galaxy had underestimated humans. Every species assumed humans were weak, emotional, or short-lived. Yet here was one, standing calmly beside her, navigating a web of threats with intelligence, patience, and courage. The first step had been taken. Humans were no longer insignificant. They were observers, strategists, and survivors, and the galaxy would have to notice. The day of the attack came quietly, without fanfare, but the air on the station was tense. Garen had anticipated it. Weeks of observation, analysis, and preparation had led to this moment. The rival dragon clans, frustrated by repeated failures, were finally willing to commit openly. They would strike with overwhelming force, assuming the dragon boss's human partner would crumble. Garen stood in the command room beside Sarilith, observing the holographic display of the star lanes. Ships moved like predators toward the station, their engines glowing red with aggression. The dragon advisors panicked, some flapping wings, others hissing demands. Sarilith's amber eyes flicked to Garen, silently asking him to act. "Calm," he said, his voice steady. "Panic won't save us. Preparation will." The dragon boss raised an eyebrow, a faint smile touching her scaled lips. She had already begun to trust his instincts. Unlike most dragons, Garen did not rush into a fight without understanding the battlefield. "Tell me your plan," she said. Garen pointed to the holographic map. "We cannot match their numbers directly. They outgun us and outnumber us, so we won't fight them head-on. Instead, we manipulate their perception, control their movement, and strike only where it counts." Velcor, who had insisted on staying in the command room despite prior failures, sneered. A human. You think subtlety will save us? Garen did not respond. Words were unnecessary. He had already begun issuing precise instructions to the station's defense systems. Redirect energy shields to make certain corridors appear weak. Create false signals of ship movement to lure attackers into traps. Prepare decoys that would imitate vital cargo and mislead enemy scanners. Humans fight differently than dragons, he explained to Sarilith quietly. We survive by adapting. We use what the enemy expects against them. We make them believe victory is easy, then show them the truth. The first wave of enemy ships arrived, engines flaring. They fired without hesitation, confident in their superior numbers. Dragons in the room shouted, urging direct engagement, but Garen held his ground. Not yet, he said. Let them overextend. Let them fall into our traps. Minutes passed. The attackers took the bait, following false signals, diverting their fleet into carefully calculated zones. Energy shields guided them into areas with concentrated defensive turrets, not strong enough to destroy them outright, but enough to confuse and disorient. Look at them, Garen said, pointing to the holographic display. They think they have the advantage. They are already making mistakes. Sarilith watched, impressed despite herself. The human beside her remained calm, even as lasers streaked across the void and explosions rocked the station. Whereas dragons often acted on instinct, favoring strength and intimidation, Garen used patience and calculation. When the enemy tried to breach the station's inner defenses, he revealed the next part of his strategy: controlled retreats. Pull the ships back, he ordered. Lead them to the central corridor, we will cut them off there. Dragons gasped. Retreating was considered cowardly. Humans did not fight like dragons. They adapted, yes, but to sacrifice nothing unnecessarily, that was alien to most species. The enemy fleet, believing the station was weaker than it appeared, followed the bait. Suddenly, energy barriers dropped in critical sections, cutting off supply lines and trapping several enemy vessels in tight corridors. Defensive drones, prepositioned by Garen's planning, struck from unexpected angles, disabling their engines. Look at the precision, Sarilith murmured. It is beautiful. Garen did not smile. Beauty had nothing to do with it. Efficiency, timing, and observation were everything. Humans survived because they learned from loss, adapted, and exploited opportunity. The battle continued for hours. Dragons fought with fury, claws, and fire. Garen coordinated human-style tactics, ambushes, feints, and targeted strikes at weak points. Each move was calculated, each reaction anticipated. By the end, the rival clan's fleet was in chaos. Many ships retreated, others were captured or disabled. Velcor, furious and humiliated, confronted Sarilith afterward. A human has humiliated our fleet. How is this possible? He is nothing. Sarilith's eyes blazed. Nothing, he is a survivor. He sees what we ignore. He predicts what we fail to notice. Underestimate him again, and you will learn how deadly humans can be. Garen, standing silently, heard the words but did not react. He had no need for recognition. Survival was the only reward that mattered. After the battle, as Com returned to the station, Sarilith walked with him along the observation deck. She remained silent for a long time, watching the enemy ships limp away into the darkness. "You have changed everything," she said finally. "Not just for me, but for every dragon who thought humans were weak," Garen shrugged. "I did what humans have always done. We survive, we adapt, we win when we must." She nodded slowly. For centuries, dragons ruled the galaxy through strength, fire, and intimidation. But this human, without scales, wings, or fire, had shown her that endurance, observation, and strategy could be more powerful than brute force. Word of the battle spread quickly. Across the galaxy, whispers began. Humans do not win by strength. They survive by understanding. Dragons, once proud and confident, began to regard humans differently. Allies grew cautious of openly challenging her empire, and enemies reconsidered their strategies. Sarilith's rivals, humiliated, could no longer ignore the human. They had assumed he was a liability. They had assumed he would falter under dragon fire and pressure. Instead, he had turned their assumptions against them. In private, Sarilith studied Garen. She had not expected to respect a human, not truly, but respect had grown. Not admiration, not affection, yet but respect. A rare and powerful thing for a dragon. You see patterns others ignore, she said. You act where we hesitate, you survive where we panic. Tell me, do all humans think this way? Garen shook his head. Some do, some survive. Most do not. That is why we are underestimated. And that underestimation makes you dangerous, she said softly. Yes, he replied. Dangerous to those who think only of strength, not strategy. That night after the station settled, Sarilith allowed herself a private thought. Humanity was not weak. They were clever, resilient, and unyielding. She realized that perhaps, in the vast galaxy, humans were more dangerous than even dragons had feared. Garen, meanwhile, reviewed the battle logs, noting mistakes that had been made and planning for future threats. For him, it was simple. Survival demanded constant learning, constant adaptation, and calm under fire. Nothing more, nothing less. The victory was complete, but the war was not over. The rival clans would regroup, adapt, and strike again. The dragon boss now had a human who could see what dragons could not, who could anticipate threats and act with precision. And the galaxy was beginning to understand something dangerous and undeniable. Humans survived where stronger species often failed. The galaxy was quiet, but that calm was only temporary. Garen had predicted it. The rival dragon clans, humiliated by previous defeats, were preparing their ultimate strike. This time, they would not hold back. Their fleets were larger, their strategies more ruthless, and their intent clear: destroy Sarilith and her human partner and crush the human's reputation once and for all. Sarilith paced the observation deck, scales glinting under the station lights. Her claws tapped softly, a rare sign of unease. She turned to Garen. They are coming, she said. This will be worse than anything before. We may not survive it. Garen studied the star lanes, calm and composed. Survival isn't about hoping for strength, he said. It's about preparation, observation, and control. We will survive because we anticipate, adapt, and act faster than they expect. Velkor, sitting nearby, hissed, You place too much faith in a human. This is hubris. Garen's green eyes met Velkor's amber glare. Not faith, he said quietly. Knowledge. Humans endure by understanding patterns, anticipating consequences, and exploiting mistakes. You should pay attention. Sarilith's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. She had never heard such words, so calm and precise, in a dragon council room. This human did not just survive. He dominated the situation without brute force. The first wave of enemy ships arrived. This time, the attack was full-scale. Hundreds of dragon vessels swarmed the station, weapons blazing, engines roaring. The dragons in the command room shouted orders, some in panic, some in fury. Sarilith's advisors were overwhelmed. Garen did not move. He had already calculated the enemy's patterns, predicted their aggression, and planned contingencies. Begin with deception, he instructed. Redirect energy shields, activate decoy signals, draw their fleet into corridors we control, make them overextend. The station systems responded like a well-oiled machine. Enemy ships, confident in their numbers, followed the false signals. They entered corridors where defensive turrets waited, fired upon decoys, and were systematically trapped. Impressive, Sarilith murmured. They think they control the battlefield, yet they fall into your designs. Garen did not smile. He did not need to. Humans survived by learning from mistakes, by observing patterns, and by staying calm when others panicked. Strength alone never won wars. Adaptability did. But the enemy was cunning. They adjusted, splitting their fleet, attempting to flank the station. Sarilith's forces flinched at first, expecting human limits to fail, but Garen had anticipated this. "Divide and counter," he said. "Redirect the smaller fleet toward the decoys. Lead the larger fleet into the central corridor. Their overconfidence will trap them completely." Dragons gasped. Divide and counter. Retreat. Humans fought differently. They did not rely on intimidation or brute strength. They used intelligence, patience, and strategy. Hours passed. The battle was intense. Lasers tore through space, explosions lit up the void, and the station shuddered under attacks. But Garen remained calm, coordinating defenses, predicting enemy moves, and directing Sarilith's forces with precision. At one point, a rival admiral tried a desperate maneuver, attempting to ram the station with a massive battle cruiser. Garen anticipated the move, calculating trajectories and predicting timing. He activated energy barriers and defensive drones, neutralizing the ship before it could strike. Sarilith watched in awe. Dragons had always believed strength alone decided outcomes. But here was a human who won without dominating physically, who shaped the battlefield with thought, foresight, and subtlety. By the time the enemy began to retreat, the result was clear. Their fleets were crippled, their pride shattered, and their confidence in dragon supremacy shaken. The dragon boss and her human partner had not just survived, had won decisively. In the aftermath, Sarilith called a council meeting. Rivals whispered, hesitant to confront her directly. They expected a humble, subservient human beside the dragon boss. Instead, they found a man calm, composed, and authoritative. Velkor, his face red with humiliation, spat out words he could not finish. The council murmured nervously. Humans, once dismissed as weak, had proven their worth, not by fire or claws but by intelligence, endurance, and strategy. Sarilith rose, her scales glinting in the light. "You have underestimated humans," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "They survive where others fail. They learn, adapt, and endure, and those who dismiss them will regret it." Garen stepped forward, calm but commanding. "We do not seek dominance," he said. "We do not conquer for pride, but we will never kneel. Those who assume weakness will find themselves unprepared for the human spirit." The chamber went silent. Dragons had rarely heard such words, spoken with neither fear nor arrogance, but with undeniable authority. Allies and rivals alike realized the truth. Humanity could not be ignored. Sarilith studied him. This human, once a stranger in her empire, had become essential. She had expected a tool, a pawn, but she had gained a partner, a strategist, and a survivor. "You have changed everything," she said quietly. "Not just for me, but for all dragons who assumed humans were weak." Garen shook his head. "We survived, that is all. But the galaxy would take notice. Across star systems, reports of the human beside the dragon boss spread. Humans, once dismissed as fragile and disposable, were now respected, feared, and carefully considered. They survived where stronger species often failed. They endured where dragons believed victory was guaranteed. For Garen, the victory was simple. Humans survived by observing, adapting, and staying calm. Brute force alone had never won, and it would never replace strategy and endurance. The rival clans retreated, licking their wounds and reconsidering their assumptions. The dragon boss's empire remained intact, stronger than ever, and with Garen by her side, it was clear that her reign had entered a new era, one where humans were no longer insignificant. In private, Sarilith approached Garen. "You are unlike any human I have met. You do not fear, you do not falter, and you do not underestimate. I once believed humans were fragile. I was wrong." Garen smiled faintly. "Humans endure, that is all. And that makes you dangerous," she said softly, "to those who underestimate you. To those who underestimate us both." "Yes," he replied, "dangerous only because we survive. As they stood together looking out at the stars, it became clear that humanity had earned a new place in the galaxy. Not as pawns, not as weaklings, but as survivors, strategists, and equals. Dragons and aliens alike would have to respect them, or face defeat. For centuries, dragons had ruled through strength and fire. But a human had shown them that survival, intelligence, and calm endurance could be far more powerful than any claw, wing, or flame. The galaxy had learned a hard truth: underestimate humans, and you will lose. And with that, the dragon boss and her human partner stepped into a new era, one of respect, strategy, and undeniable human power. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The end.